Streaming and also.
Hell yeah.
All right, I think we're live. Let me very quickly look. Yes, we are. Very good. All right. Um, well, hello everyone. Welcome to episode 2 of SigMarines. This is the second episode, so the name is sticking. It's very good to see all of you again. Over here, we take all the cool unhinged stuff that we love from Warhammer 40k, and we tell you what you might like in Warhammer Fantasy or the Old World based on shared themes. I'm one of your hosts, Myra Gill. With me is Ali, also known as Hope, wonderful person extraordinaire, and someone I'm very happy to call a dear friend. Well, Ali, when we were chatting to prepare this stream, you mentioned you were comfortable being known as the Vampire Lady. So,
Yeah, I'm very comfortable being known as Vampire Lady. I feel like that's a solid little niche for me to slide into.
oh, you're even
Uh,
wearing the. Oh, cool! I didn't even notice. That's sick.
I slid them in while you were doing your sound checks.
All right, very subtle. Well, so yeah, Vampire Lady. Why don't you tell us what the topic of today is?
So today, I wanted to talk about carcinization and/or is there a convergent evolutionary pressure that causes vampires to happen more than once? Because you have blood angels in 40k, and I am aware that vampires exist in Warhammer Fantasy, but I know nothing about them. So, why? Why vampires in 40k?
All right. Well, we got them in one. The Blood Angels, the Sons of Sanguinius, and probably top three groups in 40k that need anger management classes. And also very, very, very heavy on the blood and being vampires, which we will, of course, be discussing. So before we dive in, a little bit of a disclaimer, just like with the last stream. We'll be giving a little bit of context for the Warhammer 40k side, but since this podcast mainly focuses on Warhammer Fantasy, we won't be going in deep dives. So if you're looking for Warhammer 40k specific knowledge, I would recommend podcasts like Adeptus Ridiculous or Ashander and Coda or the Oculus Imperia series of video essays. You don't need as much knowledge on fantasy or any really, since that's what we're here to explain to you. But also because we're trying to cover multiple topics, we can't go for incredible deep dives on single individuals or factions. If you would like to know more about specific individuals that we discuss here on stream briefly, I would strongly recommend the Lorebeards series of streams by Andy Law and Lawmaster of Sotek. And with that out of the way, let's dive into some vampires. So,
Yes, that's what I'm here for.
hell yeah. Right. So, the Blood Angels. Ali, how much do you know about the Blood Angels?
I know an introductory amount about the Blood Angels. So like anytime you talk about Warhammer lore, it always comes to the disclaimer that like because there's such a wide range, I'd say I know more than the average person you'll talk to on the street about the Blood Angels, and less than maybe someone who plays Space Marines would know about the Blood Angels. So I'm somewhere in the middle there. I know who the Primarch was. I know about the blood hunger and some of the sort of politics that happened within the Blood Angels around suppressing the hunger and all of that. I'm probably getting names wrong. Uh,
You were pretty close. Yeah, so that's good to know. Well, you mentioned you know who that Primarch is. Why don't you enlighten us? Is it Horus? Is it Dawn? Is it Gilliman?
Sanguinius, as
Got him in one.
introduced, we introduced the episode with the
Oh,
children of Sanguinius.
yes, of course we did. I am very awake and have an excellent working memory, as we can all see. Correct, the Sons of Sanguinius. Of course, generally considered to be one of the noblest Primarchs, to the point where the man quite literally had angel wings, which is interesting because he grew up on one of the more hellish Primarch homeworlds, uh, Baal, which I believe it was Baal Secundus, but don't quote me on that. I'd have to look that up. It's at least in the Baal system, one of the Baal planets. Um, this used to be a verdant paradise world back in the Dark Age of Technology before it got reduced to a toxic, red-soaked hellhole populated primarily by mutants and the odd bunch of unmutated humans here and there. Um, Personally, from reading the account, I got kind of like, imagine if Mad Max was a lot slimier and crossed with Fallout, is kind of the vibe I got
Yeah,
from
rad,
Baal.
hot. I like it.
Yeah, very much. Um, and Sanguinius, being a Primarch, of course, unified the remaining unmutated humans and led them on great wars against the mutants, showing that, of course, the Primarchs are clearly and unequivocally the good guys because, well, mutants look weird, so they're definitely the evil people. There's no political commentary going on here whatsoever, no sir, none the
There
slightest.
never is with that sort of thing.
No, of course not. Warhammer 40k is famously apolitical.
Yeah, don't bring your politics into my fascism game. I mean, my regular game,
Ex-
my normal, regular tabletop game.
exactly. So, um, once he had unified his people, um, he would be eventually found by the Emperor, for Sanguinius was a very strong psyker. Of course, not on level of Magnus Red, but the psychic emanations he sent out were enough to attract the Emperor's attention and allow him to find one of his wayward sons. Um, this, of course, was a great time to find Sanguinius because his legion was pretty much on the verge of getting their shit kicked in for being too messed up. Um, the Blood Angels, as we know them today, are very noble, although more in the nobility, high culture art way that you might associate a bit with the Emperor's Children pre-heresy than in the
Hmm.
Friends of the Everyman way that you might see from the Salamanders, although there are shades of that as well. Back then, very different story. Um, the Sons of Sanguinius, before they were reunited with their Primarch, were known as the Revenant Legion. Revenant, I had to look up what specifically this means because it's a word I saw a lot in fantasy contexts associated with the undead, but I never knew the specific definition. Revenant means one who comes back from the dead, which again ties in very strongly with the themes of vampirism that we'll be discussing in a bit. But is also a very apt name because the Legion was was suffering from massive battle rages, not quite on the World Eaters level, but same ballpark, and were feeding on civilians. They were taken over by, I believe, the Red Thirst was already established as just a gene seed flaw pre-Sanguinius. Um, the Red Thirst being a blood drinking battle rage where they would tear into anything and anyone that they run into, drinking their blood, eating their flesh at times, quite literally seeing red. This was a temporary affliction. They would return to sanity eventually, but you don't want Space Marines going berserk. That is a problem.
Yeah, that was like a problem with early Space Marines, if I'm remembering right.
Yeah, that
Like,
was
like the pre-Primarch, what did they call them? Like
the
the
Thunder
barbarian
Warriors.
Thunder Warriors. Thank you. What a rad name.
I know, it's so good. I'm not sure if you've ever seen the designs for Thunder Warriors, but they're so aggressively 80s. I fucking love them. They have like shades and everything. Oh, it's so
Uh,
stupid, but it's so good.
80s
Um,
aesthetics on like heavy metal Space Marine type stuff
yeah,
fucking gets me going. Like just
hell
rad.
yeah, it's amazing. So yeah, the uh, Revenant Legion was. Oh, sorry, I kicked my table there. Was not doing too hot. The defects in their gene seed were becoming more apparent. They were becoming almost more of a liability than an asset to the Great Crusade. Thankfully, this all changed when Sanguinius emerged. The Primarch was able to help his sons better themselves, to channel their rage into art. I'm sure they made very lovely Jackson Pollock in space paintings. Um, but I mean, I joke, but the Blood Angels did channel a lot of their tempers into creating culture and creating a vision of humanity that was worth defending, um, through their noble Primarch, who was pretty much beloved by everyone else, to the point that there were a lot that were surprised that he wasn't named War Master, just surely by how beloved he was. Um, of course, the Blood Angels were instrumental in defending Terra against the forces of the Archtraitor Horus Lupercal, remaining loyalists uh, in the Horus Heresy. Sanguinius himself took the fight to the War Master on Horus's own flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, unfortunately finding Horus just before the Emperor did and having his ass beat, and leading to that very famous image where the Emperor confronts Horus, who is standing over the dead body of Sanguinius. Now, Ali, do you remember what this triggered in the Blood Angels? The death of Sanguinius.
No, I don't.
That's fair. Space Marines are, of course, the gene sons of their primarchs. They have very strong bonds on genetic levels, and there's probably some psyker nonsense going on there as well, to the point that the death of Sanguinius hit the chapter on a atomic level nearly. The trauma that of losing their primarch was literally encoded into their DNA and gene seed. Um, Whereas the Red Thirst was already a thing when Sanguinius found them, and he mostly helped them keep it under control. His death caused what was known as the Black Rage to emerge, where the Sons of Sanguinius would lose their mind and be overtaken by visions of being their Primarch in his final hours, unable to distinguish past from present or friend from foe. They would think that everyone around them was Horus and they must slay Horus to protect humanity. Now, whereas the Red Thirst was temporary, the Black Rage is not. Um, Once you fall to the Black Rage, you will be sent to join the Death Company in one glorious last charge against the enemies of mankind, where you will either die or, should you survive the battle, the chaplains of the Death Company will euthanize you, for you will never uh, be of sound mind again and forever be stuck 10,000 years ago fighting the arch traitor. Except for
Has this
Mephiston, but oh yeah.
has this happened to any other like legion in their Primarch, or because this very much is like vampire? You kill the daddy vampire, and all the other ones kind of lose it. Is that
Yeah. Um, that's a good question. Um, Top of my head, not directly, or at least not to this extent, but I might be missing someone. Like most Primarchs, basically, every Primarch except Curse had a very strong, if not good, bond with their sons, so losing them would be very traumatic no matter what. But if I'm not mistaken, the Blood Angels are pretty much unique in how deeply it fucks them up.
yeah? I'm just marking one in the vampire tally, and we're moving
Yeah.
on.
Oh yeah. I mean, um, let's see, because I did write this down. This is all okay. So yeah. Speaking of the vampire tally, let's move to our first set of thematic comparisons, which is, of course, the vampire counts of Warhammer Fantasy. Now, the vampire counts are very much, at least the ones you'll most commonly see presented, which is generally the von Carstein bloodline, are very much your Transylvania Vlad Dracula stereotype. Um, uh, and there are a lot of aesthetic surface parallels that we can draw. I mean, there's already the drinking of blood that we mentioned. Fun fact: I was reading the 8th edition codex for the Blood Angels to see just how often blood comes up, and apparently, the way that um, Gene Seed is kickstarted more or less in the Blood Angels is by drinking the blood of sanguinary priests, effectively chaplains from the Blood Angels, who have been injected with blood from Sanguinius back when Sanguinius was alive, and then those guys had their blood injected into the next sanguinary priests, etc., to keep the literal blood of Sanguinius flowing through their veins in some capacity. And the way to become a Blood Angel is they put you in a coffin for, I think, a year, and then once that's done, they make you drink the blood of Sanguinius. So yeah, yeah, parallels abound. Um, there's a
Oh
running
yeah.
gag. There's a running gag in a 40k community of read the Space Wolves Codex and take a shot every time you see the word wolf. I think you could get a similar amount of liver damage by reading the Blood Angels Codex and taking a shot every time the word blood or sanguine or sanguinary comes up. Uh,
Yeah.
I mean, you got to
It's
be
any
shuffling blood
vampire
in
fiction
earth.
has the same problem.
Exactly. Um, Fun fact on the blood drinking, the Vampire Accounts Army book for Warhammer Fantasy even calls the hunger for blood the Red Thirst, the same name as the battle rage that the Blood Angels have. It's so not subtle. I love it. Um, the themes of death and blood, we've already discussed the name of the Revenant Legion. The Legion was very nearly killed before Sanguinius gave them a new lease of life, making him more or less the noble arch vampire in a way. Um, the themes of gene seed, of course, can be kind of made parallel to the uh, blood, to the original elixir of life that created the first vampires way back when, turning them superhuman but also afflicting them with a terrible curse. This was made by Queen Neferata of Lamia, who we'll be discussing a bit more later, but effectively you could say that Neferata kind of made her own Blood Angels gene seed at home.
When mom says we have blood angels, she see it at home.
Exactly. Um, they of course sleep in coffins, as I've already mentioned, and this is just a really funny throwaway line that I found while reading the Vampire Codex or Army book. But apparently, the vampires and the Blood Angels share strongly in themes of xenophobia. Direct quote from the book. All vampires maintain a singular prejudice against non-humans. It is perhaps not impossible for a dwarf, elf, or halfling to be made a vampire, but it is unheard for one of the blooded to break their inveterate snobbery towards these races. I love how they're just saying, yeah, we could theoretically have dwarf vampires, but the vampires are just like too racist to make that happen.
Yeah, which
That
is
is like
a little bit
40k
funny because
levels.
then the Blood Angels are part of a galaxy-spanning xenophobic purge
Yeah,
that
exactly.
now I'm wondering, can could a xeno race be heretically applied like a gene seed modification?
That
Like
is
obviously it's against the rules, but like could it work?
a very good question. I'm inclined to say no because, well, for one, I'm pretty sure that if that was possible, Fabius Bile would have already made it happen. But also, the stated reason, if I'm not mistaken, for there being no female Space Marines in universe is that Gene Seed only takes with men because the Primarchs were men. If it doesn't work across different genders in the same species, I don't think it would work across species. Although I'm sure
Hmm.
that Gilliman is doing his best to make half Eldar Space Marine babies.
Yeah, that sounds like Robo Guileman propaganda to me. Let's
um,
see some roided up Tau, baby.
Absolutely. Oh, World Eater's Tau, Shaso Kaya, you can do it. I believe in you. Um, Also, I will briefly point out that I don't actually think it's possible for dwarves to become vampires because of how anti-magical they are, where vampires are basically
Hmm.
creatures purely of magic in a way. They are dark magic incarnate almost. Um, halflings are, if possible, even more resistant to magic, along with ogres. I don't think that's that plausible either. Um, Elves, I maybe not impossible, but it just strikes me as unlikely that it never happened. But I just thought the quote was too funny. Also, don't quote me on that. Like, the book says it's possible. I have my doubts, but I'm also not the guy that wrote the book. So
I've already got a mad science lab set up, and I'm doing very unethical things to dwarves as we speak. On your word here, so I
it's
hope you
always
are
more.
right.
It's always morally correct to do unethical things to dwarves. This has been
It's
fact checked by real Skaven patriots.
it's always morally correct to do unethical things. Is one of my favorite sentences. I'm putting that quote on my skin somewhere now.
Hell yeah. Um, oh, okay. Apparently my Twitch. I thought I had Twitch chat open in OBS, but apparently it's not loading, so I missed the messages. Never mind. That's okay. I'll just follow them on Twitch properly then. Okay. Cool. So that's our surface parallels. Let's dive in a bit deeper because there is a lot to go through with the vampires. So let's see. We've been talking for about 20 minutes already. Okay. Um, General vampire lore. So this all started way back when in what would become known as the Land of the Dead, Nehekara, where at this point, um, Nehekara had been a great empire already, like a very long time ago. A guy from here basically conquered all of the known world by the name of Setra, basically Alexander the Great, except Egyptian, to the point where he thought he'd conquered the world, then crossed the mountains and went, wait, there's more world, and then wept because like he was too old to conquer more. So he basically told his priesthood, like, I swear to God, you guys better find a way to keep me alive so I can do more conquering, or else. So the priesthood went to work, and they couldn't figure out immortality in time, but they promised that they would bring him back from the dead to
Just the
uh,
most empty, unenforceable promise in the history of promises. Like, no, no,
oh,
no, no, no. We'll get it. We promise. You can. Once you're dead, we're totally gonna do it. We'll bring you back. Don't worry.
yeah. The funniest thing is, Setra was such a scary motherfucker that when they said, no, we promise we'll bring you back, please don't hurt us, they meant it. Because if Setra says, you better bring me back from the dead or I'm getting up myself and kicking your ass, he means it. Like, Setra is scary. He's not the focus of today because he's Tomb Kings, not vampire counts. The dry undead versus the wet undead, if you will, but I did want to quickly mention him because
I
Setra's
don't like that. I don't like that. The texture of describing the dry undead and the wet undead is one of the most uncomfortable feelings that words have ever given me.
I'm sorry to hear, but I think it's probably the best way to summarize them.
No, we can keep going. It's fine. I'm just gonna internalize that that's a normal thing to think, and we'll move on.
That's fair. All right. So, um, Nahekara gradually becomes this nation that is obsessed with like life after death or living forever or in a way, undeath. Although originally they were mainly obsessed with just like trying to extend life as long as they could. Um, Eventually, this gave rise to the great necromancer Nagash, who is probably the scariest motherfucker in the entire setting. What Cetra was to conquering things, this guy was to necromancy. Um, he is basically the archlich. Uh, I'm not. I'm pretty sure he's the literal inventor of necromancy. He took teachings from the Dark Elves and applied them into Unlife. Which eventually I'm condensing a lot here. He tried to take over all of Nehekara, but got his ass beat and was exiled from the land, where he wandered for ages. Probably died during those wanderings, but just didn't notice because he was that steeped in necromancy. He kind of just like died, but kept going. Um, Eventually, within the World's Edge Mountains, I'm quite sure. just a quick side note, I am sorry if I'm making more mistakes than last stream. I had to put in a bunch of overtime at work to meet a deadline, so I haven't been able to prepare as much as I would have liked. So if I'm getting actually, that's why. But within, I believe, the World's Edge Mountains, he would found the great fortress of Nagashazar, a massive city from where he would eventually try to return to Nehekara to reconquer the lands that had ousted him. Because Nagash is a bitter motherfucker. He would have made one hell of a dwarf with how much this man keeps grudges. Um, so, meanwhile, back in Nehekara, the great empire split up into multiple kingdoms that I'm sorry, my mom sent me a message. I was briefly distracted. Um, that kind of they kind of like scatter into like different kingdoms that each try to claim the legacy of Cetra. Doesn't always work though. There's still like an idea of Nehekara, but like the different kingdoms have like are very much like the real power most of the time. Um, One of these is the kingdom of Lamia, which is ruled by Queen Neferata, who had a different name, I believe Nefretem back then, but I'm just going to go with Neferata, who is similarly obsessed with unlife and life after death, where she casually takes the elixir of life that Nagash had made for his for his greatest servants to give them eternal life, and casually just improves on it where Nefrata creates the first true vampires, the originator of the wet undead. Now, it's important to note that at this point, being a vampire is pretty much just a straight upgrade. The things of like sunlight and garlic and running water, etc., as best as I know, weren't a problem yet back then.
This
So
is the real
becoming
sort of like Twilight era of these vampires. Like, no weaknesses, only strengths. Very hot, live forever.
basically, I don't think they sparkled in the sunlight, but it was basically a straight upgrade over being immortal. Um, Eventually, a great general by the name of Vashnesh joins her court and becomes a vampire as well. Absolutely brilliant general, captures our heart the moment that they meet. We'll get back to him later because he's very important. Nagash eventually realizes that vampires have become a thing. He realizes this when they have tried to seize control, I believe, of Nehekara, or became too open in how they ruled as vampires and were ousted by the other kingdoms of Nehekara. Where eventually Nagash realizes, hey, these things are undead. I'm I am like the OG undead. That means that they're like descendant from me, which means I can control them. Hey nerds, come here, I need y'all. And all the vampires are subconsciously pulled towards Nagashsar. That is my alarm for my medication. Apologies. So all the vampires that have been ousted from Nekara are pulled towards the great city of Nagashazar, where Nagash basically presses them into service. He's like, "Hey, you guys hate Nehekara too, right?" And they go like, "Yeah." Well, I hate them too. Let's go fuck them up. And they go like, "Okay, hell yeah, let's go." And Nagash wants to pick a guy to lead the vampires into battle because he's not going himself. Because last time he did that, he got his ass beat, and he doesn't want to like have that happen again. So he's just going to be like the great puppet master king back home, sending them out to wreck shit in his name, but staying safely behind himself.
So he's like functionally just playing Warhammer. Like, he got a bunch of models, and he's like, you guys belong to me now. And then he collected them all, was like, you're mine, now go and do my battle for me.
Oh my god, he actually did. Yes, Nagash was playing Warhammer. Everyone else was playing chess, where Nagash is playing Warhammer. Very true. But before he sends them out, he gifts Fashnesh a great ring, which will make him truly immortal. So vampires already can't really be killed, or at least it's very difficult. But while wearing the Ring of Nagash, Vashnesh could be destroyed down to the last atom and he'd still regenerate. Like, that's the level of bullshit OP that we're talking about. Like, this man just cannot die while wearing this ring. However,
Wow.
Nagash is also a paranoid motherfucker with a real control freak streak. So what he also did was built in mind control in this ring, where Vashnesh could basically mind control all the other vampires, but Nagash and his bro for life second in command, Arkan the Black, could also mind control Nagash. So there were like layers of like mind control going on here. Um, Initially, they don't necessarily notice this as much, but eventually it becomes very clear that Vashnesh is giving orders he doesn't want to give. Because at this time, Vashnesh is still quite noble. He's like, hey, we should maybe try to not be horrible people to the mortals that we rule, which was a revolutionary idea at the time.
That's
Whereas,
always how the coup starts. You
yeah,
start telling people they got to be nice to each other before long.
oh yeah, no, not yeah, but like, no, like Vashnesh was like all about like not being assholes about being vampires. He wanted to like actually do good by the mortals that he ruled. However, at this, a lot of the other vampires didn't quite like that. Um, but Nagash at this point, like we said, spiteful motherfucker, very much wanted to just destroy Kemri, the greatest kingdom of Nehekara that had more or less unified all the others into resisting this new vampiric invasion by Nagash. So Nagash's orders weren't conquest; they were just, well, bluntly genocide. He wanted to like kill every single living thing in Kemri and Nehekara and raise it back up as his undead slaves. Which
Yes, you do.
Vashna, yeah, as you do. I mean, you know, if you're going to be a necromancer, commit to the bit, right? Um, Vashna didn't
Yeah.
really like this much. But he also realized I can't take this ring off because I'm being mind controlled. Um, if I just take it off or anything, Nagash will know and he will punish like all the other vampires. And I don't care about some of them, but one of them is my wife, and I'm already not a fan of the fact that I'm mind controlling my own wife. I also don't want to cause her true death. Um, so I'm going to have to kind of like work a trick in somehow. So he goes to challenge the leader of Kemri, Al-Khadizar the Conqueror, to a duel. And during this duel, Vashnesh could easily have like killed Al-Khadizar, like trivially. But um, eventually, he deliberately just lowers his guard and basically goes like, "Hit me, come on, come on, hit me, come on," and lets Al-Khadizar decapitate him, um, trusting in the power of the ring to basically bring him back from the dead. But while he's dead and regenerating, he can't be mind controlling the vampires because, well,
Right.
there's no mind to do the mind controlling. So as he dies and starts regenerating, the mind control of the other vampires is broken, and they all just fucking scatter. They're just like, Nagash is fucking scary. We're out. Bye. And all the vampires peace out to all the corners of the earth in order to, um, well, partially just get away from this conflict, but also in a large part to just escape Nagash's wrath, because this dude is scary and he knows what's happening. Um, and they can run as hard as they want. They're not outrunning Nagash's vengeance, because this is where Nagash, realizing what's happened, curses the vampires. And this is where he curses them with sun allergy. From this point onward, the sun becomes the deadly obstacle to vampires that it normally is in fiction. It's not because it's an innate thing in vampirism, it's a curse laid upon them by the greatest necromancer in history.
Oh, interesting. Okay. And also, the Blood Angels aren't averse to sunlight. They weren't cursed. They're a different type of vampire. They had the real gene seed, not the mom said we had at home.
Hmm.
I'm here to tie it back together to
Yeah.
do it in universe. Everything turns into vampires one day. I'm here to
Well,
pervert all of the actual lore that you have into my own goal.
I am very here for it. I mean, that's what Warhammer podcasts are for, right? Like, just completely body the lore into something more entertaining.
Yeah, making it
So,
somehow more wild and less hinged than it already is.
absolutely. So the vampires scatter to the eight corners of the world, and this is where the different bloodlines are created, which I'll be diving into in a bit because they are really cool. Um, but one, just one thing one other like very strong parallel that's there to note is the general themes of like decaying and falling from grace. It's like after the death of Sanguinius, the Blood Angels started falling more and more into the Black Rage over the millennia.
Hmm.
Um, Similarly, with vampires, the longer they go on, the more degraded and vile and twisted they become. This is because in Warhammer, magic is quite literally presented as a wind. They're literally called the winds of magic. And they come from the great polar gates into the realm of chaos, the warp, on the north and south pole of the world. And generally speaking, they'll split up into one of the eight winds of magic, which are more or less ish elemental winds. There's fire, there's life, there's death, there's shadow, there's light, there's earth, there's metal, and I'm forgetting one, but it doesn't matter. Generally speaking, I split up into pure forms of magic, but if you pull them all together, as they originally are when they come out of the polar gates, you end up with dark magic. It's kind of like how if you mix paint, like you can have a lot of like really colorful radiant paints, but if you mix them all together, you end up with a goopy brown.
Yeah, okay, I get it.
Yeah, it's kind of the same idea.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and um, magic tends to be attracted to things that it's associated with. So, for example, Akshi, the Wind of Fire, is attracted to people with anger issues, is attracted to ambition, is attracted to industry. These are places where Akshi, like as a wind, gathers. So you'll find that the best fire wizards are the ones that have like a very hot temper because that quite literally attracts more of the magic that they use to them. Dar, the wind of dark magic, is attracted to death, agony, and general bad vibes. So what I'm saying is the average office environment is positively redulent with it.
That's fair. That's a fair call.
Yeah. Fun fact: Warpstone, which is imagine like magic cocaine uranium, horribly
In there,
mutate.
I'm
Yeah,
imagining.
yeah, it's like horribly mutating stone, rock, mineral, gem, crystal, whatever you want to call it. It's quite literally coalesced dark magic that's taken crystal shape. If you're near it, it will mutate your body and mind. The Skaven use it as currency, cocaine, and to power and as batteries for their Magitech innovations because the Skaven are simply the best. But most sane races avoid it like the plague because it's incredibly dangerous, but also a very potent source of dark magic, which is why the undead, specifically the vampire counts, tend to use it a fair bit as well. Because it just Warpstone just being present will make the dead rest uneasy. Because it's coalesced dark magic, it is the wind of death,
Oh,
of undeath. So if there's enough of it in one place, you don't even need a necromancer. The dead will just like start waltzing about on their own.
very cool.
Yeah,
Love
Warpstone's
that.
great. And um, as I already mentioned, winds are attracted to things that exemplify the things the winds are associated with. Vampires are quite literally just creatures of dark magic. which means that over time they attract more dark magic, and that wind will actively make them more like dark magic as well. They become like, no matter how noble they start out, eventually they'll become twisted, they'll become cruel, they'll become vindictive, they'll become domineering. They'll turn more into like the evil vampire archetype simply because they keep attracting dark magic by virtue of existing.
This is very sort of like Black Rage, Blood Rage sort of.
Exactly. So
They're all turning into crabs, baby. I see it. So if the Skaven use the Warpstone as currency, and that's also a very dark magic-y thing, do the Skaven and the vampires like ever get up to shenanigans together?
mm, in what sense? Because the answer is yes, but I'm trying to see what specifically you mean so I
In
can
the sense
get
that
this.
they just seem like natural allies, like the people who love dark magic and the people who are like made of dark magic seem like they would either be naturally constantly competing for the same resource, or they're like you and me, buddy. Like we're, you know what's up. You know this dark magic. That's what's up. You know.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because both of these have happened. Nagashazar was founded where it was partially because it sat on like a massive warpstone meteor. And Nagash wanted to use all of that warpstone for his very powerful rituals to kill and resurrect every living being on the world. The Skaven figured this out and were like, "Ooh, massive warpstone deposit. Can we have some?" And they did work together for quite a while. The problem is that Skaven just culturally, societally, and like damn near genetically are just wired to be backstabbing, treacherous little shits. Um, so if you're working with Skaven, it's not a question of if they're going to double cross you. It's not even a question of when are they going to double cross you, because the answer is at the first possible opportunity. The question is, why the fuck are you stupid enough to make an alliance with Skaven in the first place? Um, but with Nagash specifically, he didn't notice at the time because he hadn't really run into Skaven before. But the Skaven saw how powerful he was becoming after he'd defeated Al-Khadizar and had turned all of Nehekara into the lands of the dead, but the dry undead. Um, the Skaven were like, well, if we don't stop this guy, he's going to cast a giant ritual that kills everything in the world and raises it back up as undead. I don't want to be killed. Like, I don't give a shit about literally every single other person here, but like, I don't want to die. So they forged probably one of the strongest weapons in Warhammer Fantasy, and that's saying something. In, I think I'm doing this top of my head. I think it was called the Fellblade, um, which is, if I'm not mistaken, made of pure warpstone and laden with every single curse and hex that the Skaven could muster. And there's a lot of those. Uh, to the point where like they didn't want to wield it themselves because it was just too dangerous. It would melt you into goop. They had to literally carry it just like sheathed entirely in like a lead sheath, like an inch thick, just to like keep it from like melting the brain of the person that was carrying it. And even then, you don't want to touch the pommel or the handle. And they went to
That's such
Alcali.
like an apt like criticism of the whole mutually assured destruction, build the biggest bomb you can ever have sort of situation of like just what a cutting satire of that.
Yeah,
We've
basically.
piled every bit of nasty we can into a single weapon. We don't know how it works. We don't want to carry it or use it, and it will kill us if we do.
Hmm. Absolutely. Okay, I looked up. It was indeed the Fellblade. It wasn't pure Warpstone. It was Warpstone mixed with Grumrill, which is Warhammer Fantasy's I can't believe it's not Mithril. Um, and this is a weapon that was damn near designed to kill gods. Nagash was pretty close to a god, but he wasn't one yet, so it would definitely do a number on him. So they sent their sneakiest ratman into the dungeons of Nagashazar towards Al-Khadizar, the king of Gamri, the one that had killed Fashnesh. And like, hey, dude, you're already basically dead anyway. You hate Nagash, right? Here's a sword that can kill him. Go get him, buddy. And they gave um, Al-Khadizar the sword, the Fellblade, which he would then use to confront Nagash as he was conducting his great ritual. And during this great struggle, Al-Khadizar would cut off Nagash's hand. And this blade was so incredibly toxic that that was enough to basically destroy Nagash almost entirely. Not fully, because Nagash is a tenacious bastard, but he's been out of the picture basically since, except through a couple artifacts. His hand survived. This is basically a Hand of Vecna callback, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure which one was
Yeah, I was gonna
earlier.
say I'm getting a lot of Vecna vibes from this, and I was just doing a little bit of because I have a little bit of like a D&D brand to protect here, so I wanted to make sure I got it right. But there was also a whole thing with the hand getting cut off by a sword wielded by his second in command that was, yeah.
No, the second in command of Nagash was Arkana Black.
Ah,
Al-Qadisar was the guy that killed Fashnesh and rallied Nekara against Nagash. But yeah, Games Workshop originally, I believe, started out as a distributor for D&D before they made their own stuff. So I think Vecna came first and Nagash is based on them, but don't quote me on that.
I wouldn't be surprised because Vecna is one of like the longest standing villains in D&D lore.
Absolutely. So, um, okay, so that is how the Skaven first worked with and then betrayed Nagash, who wasn't a vampire. But to answer your question, have the Skaven worked with or competed for Warpstone with the Undead? The answer is yes, a lot.
Beautiful. My
Abs-
beautiful vampire lords and their wonderful little rat men.
Mm. The Skaven are amazing. I can't wait to discuss them at one point. They're completely unhinged. They built giant rat wheels, slapped Tesla coils and a motor on them, and sent them into enemy lines. I cannot begin to describe how cool the Skaven are. They're so
Uh,
unhinged. I love them. Anyway, so with that little detour aside, let's get into some bloodlines of the vampire counts. And there
hell yeah.
are, let's see, I think there's six, two, three, four, five, five. I'm counting five. Maybe I'm missing one. I have notes on five, so we'll go through those. I think that was all. Um, all right, let's take it from the top with the Blood Dragons, who were founded by Aborash. Basically, all the great bloodlines were founded by one of the original vampires from the court of Lamia. Um, and Aborash, after the destruction of Nagash, fled northwards with four of his disciples. And this guy was like, he was a baller on the battlefield. Like he just went to town on anyone that opposed him. Like this guy is the epitome of like martial prowess. He fled towards the Empire, which is basically Warhammer's Holy Roman Empire. Except he dropped the Holy and the Roman because they were done pretending. And as they fled through the Badlands, there were stories of him and his four disciples just regularly dumpstering entire armies. Like, like this guy and his four allies against five armies of orcs, it's not even a challenge. Like he could do that with one hand
Wow.
tied behind his back. So Abarash was really like he really wanted to be the ideal of like the perfect like soldier. But because he was a vampire, he still had like the red thirst. Like he still wanted to drink blood, and he was really furious that he couldn't always control his drive for furious animalistic murder instead of being a glorious, disciplined warrior guy. Again, ties to the Blood Angels. Very upset about the Black Rage and red thirst in this case. Um, so a lot of seething and molding ensured. And eventually, Abarash would engage in a quest to take on Macho Man Randy Savage at WrestleMania 7. That is to say, he wanted to become the Ultimate Warrior. That is
Got it.
explicitly.
Okay.
Ultimate Warrior is how they describe him time and time again. I couldn't resist like one wrestling joke.
Does he have the full getup, like the sort of like really rainbow bits and uh hold on. I need to pull up a picture of Ultimate Warrior to make
I know what he
sure.
looks like. It's so good.
I know you know what he looks like.
He's
To
got
make
like
sure.
little streamers from his arms, I think.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Oh, and I mean his face paint could be very that's very vampire-y.
Yeah. I don't think he actually looked like that. His
It does in my
vampiric
head
spawn.
now.
Very fair. That you know what? That's fair. I'm not going to begrudge you that in the slightest. It's a very good image. His spawn have a really cool aesthetic. One of my favorites in all of Warhammer Fantasy, I think. I'll describe them in a bit. I don't have pictures for. I don't have a slideshow like I did last time because again, I just didn't have enough time to prepare. But the Blood Knights look so fucking good. But so he wants to become the ultimate warrior, and eventually in his wanderings, he finds this giant fuck off red dragon on a mountaintop, and all his disciples are like, "Dude, dragons are no joke. Don't fight it." And he's like, "I'm gonna fight it." And his disciples are right. Dragons are no joke, but neither is one of the first vampires. And he fights this massive red dragon on this mountaintop for a day and a night. I don't know how he didn't burn in the sun. Um, Not all vampires are susceptible to the curse of the sun, some more so than others, but I still don't know how he pulled it off. Maybe he just like kept fighting in the shade of the dragon or something, I don't know.
Oh
Um,
yeah, that
like
makes sense. He just uses the dragon as protection from the sun.
just Dark Souls rolls into the shadow every time the
Yeah,
dragon tries to fly.
he's
That's
just
actually
clipping into the dragon.
I'm honestly that's a really cool idea. I'm going to choose to believe that. And for like full day and a full night, and eventually he kills this giant ancient red worm. And like again, dragons Warhammer are no joke. These things are terrifying. And he kills one. And he drinks deep from its throat, like sinks his fangs into the worm's throat, and he drinks deep. And the dragon's blood is so potent that it permanently quenches his vampiric thirst. Abarosh does not need to drink blood anymore because uh it like the dragon's blood permanently sated his hunger, and he went on to have an incredible title reign as WWF champion.
I mean, life hack. Am I right? Or
Absolutely,
undeath hack.
yeah,
All you gotta do is kill and drink a dragon. No more bloodthirst. Someone should
exactly.
tell Sanguinius about this before it's too late.
Yeah, why didn't you like just take on the Void Dragon Sanguinius? That would have been so easy.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, but yeah. So and after he accomplishes this, he's like, okay, well, I've become the ultimate warrior. My disciples, you must do this too. Go forth, become masters of the martial, and when you two can pin Hulk Hogan for the 1, 2, 3, you shall be free from the curses of that vampirism bestows as well. And he basically says, "I'll be watching you. Go become really good warriors in my name. Follow in my footsteps." And his disciples do go and become incredible warriors. Um, they have a habit of turning primarily like paragons of combat, a lot of knightly orders. Um, One of the most notable ones is that Valach Harkon, which they named him Valach because Games Workshop is all the subtlety of a goddamn sledgehammer that's on fire. Um, what should we name the vampire guy? Wallachia. Wallachia. No, wait, that's a country name. Wallach. Wallach. There you go.
Yeah. Take letters
Um,
away, don't put them on. That's my fantasy writing tip.
exactly. So, Wallach Harkon takes over this knightly order of the Empire, one of the most famous and respected ones, and turns it into the vampiric knightly order of fucking your shit and drinking your blood. And he's not the only one. The Red Duke of Mousillon, I believe, is also a Blood Knight. Basically, the Scions of Abaresh tend to form vampiric knightly orders that focus a lot on discipline and martial prowess. They don't really tend to form empires because they're just more focused on becoming the perfect warrior.
Hmm.
Um,
So what's happening with the daddy vampire this whole time? He says, "Go forth, be better vampires in my name, be the ultimate warriors." And then does he just like return to his home planet? Like,
I must go. My people meet me. I mean,
yeah,
basically, he kind of like disappears from the scene at this point because he doesn't really have because you gotta imagine, like, this guy basically won. He became like the perfect warrior. He doesn't need to drink blood anymore. He's completely tamed his beast. He's not got much to do other than watch what his kids are doing. So his kids say that like he's still watching from the shadows, but he himself isn't really around. Not dead. Well, I mean, he's a vampire. He's dead, but not perma dead.
Yeah, not. He's just sort of on New Game Plus right now, watching the kids. Like,
Yeah, he's in observer mode.
yeah,
And just to hammer home how scary his children are, they are a unit you can field on tabletop as heavy cavalry. And I looked them up. On the tabletop, they are better than Bretonnian Grail Knights. Bretonnian Grail Knights, for context, are basically the Knights of the Round Table from Arthurian legend. Like, those guys are demigods. And these guys are stronger than them. They're scary sons of bitches.
that's vampires.
Yeah. And I'm going to very quickly just like look up an image of them for you because they are just too cool to not see. I can't really put it up on screen sadly because I said I didn't have that prepped, but they have an absolutely fantastic aesthetic. Like, on. Like, these guys look
Oh,
incredible.
these guys are fucking rad.
I know, right? They're amazing. I really want some. I have an army of vampire counts that I really need to like finish painting. I really want some blood knights at some point. They're so fucking cool.
Extremely. Let's
Oh,
see if I can.
let's see, where is my? Okay. Um. So that is the first of our bloodlines. That is the blood dragons. Of note is that Malach Harkon, the guy that turned. Ooh, nice. Thank you.
You're
The guy,
welcome.
the guy that turned this first vampire order of, I believe they're now known as the Blood Dragons, uh, has a relative known as Luther Harkon, who is literally a vampire pirate king because Warhammer is fucking rad. We have vampire pirates, and it's exactly as cool as it sounds.
Yeah, it had fucking better be with a name like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so
I'll
good.
leave these up here until you give me someone else to put.
Gotcha.
Well,
So, yeah. Oh, you there? Hello? I gone or is Ali gone? Check stream. I seem to be streaming just fine. Ali seems to have frozen. Hmm. Out actually. Pop this out and hopefully I can actually. That might actually be better if I just set my OBS to capture the pop-out window. Let's do that. Right. Um, Blood Dragon's too powerful for stream. Yeah. That tracks. Oh, rip. Uh, graphics driver crashed. So yeah, Ali will be back in a second. So how are you guys doing? Enjoying the stream so far? I'm having a great time. Like I said, I'm a bit frazzled today because I had to put in a bunch of overtime at work. So I'm not like as prepared or coherent as I'd like to be or as I was last stream. But I'm still having a great time talking about vampires because the vampire guns are so goddamn cool, man. Hey, and it's Ali again. Wonderful. Hi, hi.
mhm.
You good?
I'm back. Can you hear me? Because I can't hear anything.
I can hear you wonderfully well.
Bummer.
Can you hear me? Test 1, 2, 3. Hello, vampire time. Test 1, 2, 3. I might need to actually reboot. Okay, I might have to wait for a second then. Um, all right. Well, if we have to take a quick, right, Allie is going to have to quickly go for a reboot.
All right,
Right.
I can hear you again.
Oh, hey, wonderful, sweet.
Sorry about that.
No
Just
worries.
panicked as my entire computer turned all my screens to black for no reason, and I
Uh,
had no idea what to do. But we're back.
Yay! I'm very glad to see you again. Um, um, right. So let's see, where were we? I think we just finished up the Blood Knights, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
Sweet.
we're just finishing up the Blood Knights, and they are so rad.
Yeah, I love them. They're so good. Um, and to be clear, like these guys are an elite unit you can field. Normally, elite units are just like really competent undead, like uh, Graveguard or something. But these guys are to a man full-fledged vampires. You're fielding entire regiments of vampires here. That's how scary they are.
Damn.
Yeah, right. So then we get from the Blood Dragons, we take a hard turn away from the battlefield into the even more cutthroat and no less dangerous areas of high society when we come to the Lahmians of Queen Neferata. So, when I took my first notes on the Lahmians, the quite literal first bullet point I wrote down is girl boss Illuminati, because that's basically what they are. Uh,
Yes.
yeah, they are all about beauty, intrigue, and being massive socialites. They have plots that are like centuries, if not millennia, in the making.
It's real
But
like Bene Gesserit Warcraft vampires. Not Warcraft, Warhammer vampires.
yeah, pretty
I'm
much.
getting Warhammer canceled for making that slip of the tongue.
It's funny I mention that actually, because one thing that the 8th edition Vampire Counts Army book explicitly stated is that in order to prepare the world for vampiric domination, the Lamians are sowing discord between various religious cults, like the cult of Sigmar and the cult of Ulrich, to get them to fight, while also spreading humanist ideas that the gods are fake and like aren't real in order to weaken religions so that it can't oppose the vampires as much. These guys are doing like flat earth atheism on purpose to weaken the world's spiritual defenses against vampirism. So they're kind of like reverse Bene Gesserit.
Bene Gesserit, whose only job is to make things worse and like
Oh, the Bene
ruin things
Gesserit.
for everybody.
So just the Bene Gesserit.
Yeah, so I don't feel like it's reversed at all. I feel like we're talking about the same people.
Yeah. Wait, I only now just realized since we're doing parallels with 40k, they're basically doing the imperial truth of like state atheism, but on purpose while knowing it's a bad idea.
While knowing specifically that gods exist.
Yeah, exactly. Like the gods specifically and explicitly exist in Warhammer, and these are like, no, they don't. Don't believe in them. They're fake, and they're only doing that so that the gods can't oppose them as much anymore. It's great.
Yeah, I
So,
mean that makes total sense. If they
absolutely.
start using the voice, I'm gonna lose my mind.
Well, I mean, they are very seductive and good at persuasion because high society socialites.
Yeah.
They have like a burning love for wealth and heathenism, but because they're undead, they can't truly enjoy it. They're very fast and can be very sneaky as well with their vampire magic, and they have a love for politics, of course. Um, they are quite unique among vampires for a couple of reasons. Partially because they're mostly women. It's called the Lahmian Sisterhood. This is because Neferata hates men. That's not a joke.
Queen.
She Neferata has just been in her like life and unlife fucked over so much by men. The original mortuary cults of Nehekara, the priests that was obsessed with immortality, was male only, which is also why she had to make her own I can't believe it's not Gene Seed. Um, then
I
she got
love her
fucked over
already.
by Nagash, etc. So yeah, the poor girl has just been fucked over by men so often that she's just like, right, no more boys allowed, they're yucky. They have cooties, girls only. Like very, very rarely, exceptional men will be given the blood kiss, which is how Warhammer Fantasy describes making someone a vampire. But even then, they won't be given like the same level of trust and inner circle permissions as women are given. But also because they're also unique from a lot of other vampires in that they actually tend to have a very strong network between within the sisterhood. Lahmians tend to keep in touch with both each other and Neferata a lot, which is quite rare. This also ties back into their plots that have been eternities in the making, with the ultimate goal of returning to the kingdom of Lamia, which is currently in Hekara, ruled by the Dry Undead. But they don't want to return and take it over as a tomb kingdom. They want to bring living mortal humans back there to rule over and restore Nekara as it was in its heyday.
Hmm,
Um, so to that end, they are infiltrating a lot of like society, like high society generals and politicians to eventually down the road spur a great migration southwards back to Lamia in order to restore their original kingdom. Of course,
interesting.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I love my problematic girl boss queens.
Oh,
I'm
absolutely.
sold. They'll never
I
do anything wrong in my mind. Tell me about their war crimes now.
same. I don't have that many notes on our war crimes, but one that I do have is that there are rogue elements that are like, well, we've been preparing humanity for being ruled by vampires for ages. We want to rule over them now. And uh, most of the Lahmians are like, no, you idiots, they're not ready yet. One of them took over Kislev at one point, though, which is imagined like all of Slavic culture thrown into a melting pot, and then having a lot of like ice magic and polar bears thrown onto it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I was gonna say it's giving Barovia, but like then you said ice
No.
magic and polar bears, and like that's a fun twist. I like that.
Yeah. No. They're not Borovia. Borovia is just Sylvania, which
Yeah,
we'll get to in a bit when we get to the von Carsteins. But not really. It's more like mostly Russia, but with like winged hussars.
got it. Okay.
Um, and one of them eventually took over as vampire Tsarina Katarin. But she was cast down, and Nefrata used that as a excuse to go, see, we can't take them over yet because they'll just throw us out. Now shut up and get back to plotting. So the Lamians are very patient with their schemes and plots mostly. Let's see. Um, yeah, so something that's actually kind of fun about them is that sometimes they're defenders of humanity in a twisted way. But like defending the empire from chaos and the like, but that's mainly from a nobody conquers this weak-willed mortal cattle but us perspective.
Yeah, like nobody's gonna steal our food. Like that's not.
Yeah, basically, like no one gets to lord tyrannically over these people except for me.
Yeah, we spent so long getting these motherfuckers ready
Yeah,
to be
exactly.
ruled over, and if someone else is gonna slide in at the last second, not gonna happen.
No, no, absolutely not on my watch. So that's mostly the Lamians. Next we have the Necrarchs under, and this name I don't know how to pronounce it. It's like W apostrophe Soran. It's like Vusoran.
Sorons? Yeah.
Vusoran. To make it even funnier, there's also another one called Usheran, which is just like Ushoran instead of W apostrophe Soran. So that's going to be very easy to distinguish. Uh,
Yeah.
Vasaran was unique in that he was actually a Nagash loyalist. He was the only one that, after all the vampires fled, he stayed with Nagash to help him out. And in reward for his services, he was granted access to one of Nagash's 9 tomes of necromancy. Um, or the nine tomes, Nagash's nine tomes, which basically supercharged his necromantic wizard abilities. He used the blasphemous knowledge within the one of the 9 books of Nagash that he was allowed to read to pen the Grimoire Necronium, which is the most accessible manual on starting a spirit Halloween that exists in the Warhammer world. Because Nagash's 9 books are significantly more powerful, but they also come with a lot more brain melting. So generally, you'll want this version, which is basically the Spark Notes version with some prophecies chucked in for good measure, because it's not as powerful, but it will also not obliterate your mind.
Yeah, it's like the diet version, the like alcohol-free spirits of Nagash's necromantic compendium.
Basically, yeah. So his bloodline, the Necrocs, are a bunch of like massive nerds. They're the ones the other vampire. These are the ones that the bloodlines like shove into lockers and demand their lunch money from. Um, but because they're such nerds, they're also some of the most powerful necromantic wizards among the undead. Um, they have they share Nagash's vision of a world that just doesn't have any more mortals in it because they're all undead. They don't want to rule over the mortals; they want to kill them and raise them back up. In the vision of Nagash. Now, naturally, this kind of leads to a bit of an issue. Ali, can you see what the problem here might be?
I mean, if there's no more mortals, then who are they going to eat? That seems like my first thing.
Exactly. So they, of course, realized they would run into dietary problems down the road, and Busharan started working on how to fix this, finding alternative food sources. And Busharan has managed to go vegan in that he can, instead of feeding on blood, he can feed off dark magic. Um, I don't quite know how. I imagine he just like plucks the wind from the ether and uses that to fuel his body, but he might also just be, doing lines of warpstone dust. I don't know.
See, that's he learned from the Skaven.
Yeah, exactly. Now the Necrocs, his children, do still need blood from time to time, but because they can also feed off Dar, they can go without for way longer than the other vampires. These guys can go on diets. It's kind of wild. The thing is,
So
though,
like nobody told them they could just kill a dragon and then like ipso facto,
yeah,
bingo
exactly,
bango, you don't have to eat anymore.
exactly. Now, because they taken way more dark than the other vampires, and because they're also way more into necromancy than the other vampires, although all vampires are into necromancy to some degree, they take a lot more of Dar into themselves, and as we mentioned, magic warps you to reflect the magic that you're wielding more. And with how like the extreme amount of dark magic these guys take in, they turn into hideous corpse-like creatures. They're still not the ugliest vampires, but it's close.
Are
And
they still wet undead at this point? Or are they
yeah,
are
yeah,
they
yeah, they're
starting to
still.
desiccate a little bit?
Oh no, they can be desiccated, but they're still wet undead. I'm just using the distinction of like wet undead are like the vampires because they have like zombies. Their skeletons are probably like the skeletons that they do have are probably covered in mud and rust. The
Got
vampires are
it.
all like about blood, etc. Whereas the dry undead, the Doom Kings, are basically like undead Egyptian armies. They are very polished, orderly, colorful.
Oh, so it's nothing to okay. When
It's
you
much more of a
said wet
clean
versus dry
fight.
undead, I was picturing something much more like CSI, like bad episode of Bones, like how wet or dry the corpse was that became alive.
Oh, I mean, that's kind of what I was going for. The vampire accounts are much more about like decay and like rotting zombie corpses, etc.
Got it. Okay.
Um, they have way more themes of like decay than Camry does. Wait, I'll show you some images to compare. Uh, let's see. This looks like a good image. Actually, wait, I'm just going to. See. So this is the vampire counts, the wed undead,
Uh-huh.
and then we have, for comparison, the Tomb Kings, which are the dry undead. And like, yes, I mean, they're still like dead corpses walking, the Tomb Kings, but they look way less like rusted and decaying than the vampire counts do, right?
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, if there's something I know about Warhammer is you always have to have a proxy for ancient Egypt in there somewhere,
Hmm.
with a heavy theme on tombs.
Absolutely, and that's the Tomb Kings for you. So the fun thing about Wishrun is that kind of like what was the name again? Abarash. He wasn't really an empire builder. He just wanted to sit in his wizard nerd tower and study the spirit realm a lot. So effectively he meditated a lot to master the spirit realm and kind of like conquer death by doing yoga really hard. Eventually, that got him stabbed mid meditation by one of his spawn for his troubles. After which the Necroarchs weren't really a unified force anymore. Um, they are still like giant wizard nerds, um, and they'll still generally strive, I think, for fulfilling Nagash's vision of a world of the dead instead of ruled by the dead. But they're not like a single faction anymore like they used to be. So
Yeah,
that's Necroarchs, and then we have the Strigoi under Usharon. And Usharon was basically a dollar store vampire. Like he was fine, but he wasn't nearly as good in leadership or politics or martial skill as the others were. Though he had a golden tongue and like brute strength and endurance were his forte. However, he wasn't really taken seriously by the other vampires, which made him an insecure little bitch. As a child, like even before he was a vampire, he wasn't really taken seriously. He kept bullying his sister as a child to make himself feel better. Um, then eventually, when he was turned into a vampire, he was made the guy in charge of like masked balls, etc., which was like, it was a fun position, but wasn't really one that was taken seriously compared to like general or treasurer or what have you.
yeah, he's given
Um,
like a make work job. Like he was the nepo baby who's given like just a job that pays.
yeah,
Doesn't
sort
take
of.
that you don't have to trust him very much.
Yeah, sort of. So after Nagash was defeated and Fashnesh like stopped the mind control, he fled north as well into the Badlands again, which Abarash had crossed, just like butchering everything he found. Usharan found an empire here, um, which was ruled by a man that wore the crown of Nagash, the king of Strigolas. Um, and this crown was possessed by a fragment of Nagash that had survived, but the fragment was weak enough that a strong enough wearer could dominate it. And Usharan basically went like, "Ooh, I can turn tables Nagash. Let's go. So eventually he couped this government, declared himself king, and wore the crown of Nagash to dominate Nagash, kind of out of spite, because again, insecure little bitch. Um, and then he actually did something quite interesting in that he founded, like, he made sure that this kingdom of vampires followed very strict rules of law. Vampires were only to feed on like criminals, etc. In order,
Interesting.
yeah, it was quite interesting. He was trying to build an empire that wouldn't get destroyed by all the other people in the world for being horrible, basically. Um, And once he built this, he basically reached out to all the other vampires and said, like, hey, you should come like serve under me. We can build something beautiful here. And kind of like flex on the gash while we're doing it. And all the other vampires like, no. And basically went to war with him because they kind of figure like, hey, he has the crown of the gash. He's just going to try to dominate us again. Screw that guy. And the Lahmians, who, if you remember, were already very integrated into human societies at this time,
Hmm.
sicked the humans on him. And a great host of humans marched southward to fight the Empire of Strigos. And Ushuran would have absolutely destroyed these humans. But the problem was that, like, while his main force was out fighting the humans, the orcs saw that he'd left his capital undefended and were like, "Oh, cool, Shank." And a great orc wag under leadership of one Warboss Cracktooth came in with a steel chair to hit him in the undefended capital. And so Ushan was forced to retreat, like in a very chaotic, disorganized return to the capital that saw most of his rearguard completely destroyed by the humans, where he had to uh, see off the orcs. He did manage to kill the war boss, um, but then the orc shaman blasted Usharan with wizard bullshit, which killed him. The loss of their vampire daddy sent the Strigoi into complete disarray and made them flee to Kislev, all the way up in the north. Um, this is where they found Vashnesh, who was kind of like just traveling around the world at this point, and they begged to serve him. And Vashnesh went like, nah, dude. Like, your dad was cringe. Your bloodline is cringe. You guys are cringe. I don't like you. Go away. And basically, from this point on, the Strigoi would be hunted by all the other vampires. And they were forced to kind of like live on the edges of civilization in like abandoned tombs in mountains in the forests, forced to feed on the recently dead, on leapers, on ghouls, even on animals, and this kind of like made them fall from grace and morph into being more animal than man.
Oh
To the,
wow.
yeah, to the point where the Strigoi vampires are like easily the most animalistic of them all. Just as an example, here is an image of a Strigoi vampire.
Oh wow, yeah, that's like not even super a vampire anymore. Like
Nope,
that's
more they're more ghouls almost.
get this up for yeah. I mean they're very like bat-like. So one of the arguments you hear about the Blood Angels when they're talking about vampires, like do they have the power to transform into animals like bats or wolves or whatever? Because classically vampires have that. And it seems like Warhammer Fantasy vampires explicitly do have that ability. So I'm taking that in the points against Blood Angels being a vampires column because in Warhammer Fantasy explicitly vampires do have that ability.
Good question. I'm not entirely sure actually. I know they have control over animals. I'm not sure if they can change into them. I think they can, but I'm not 100% on that.
Well, it looks like that's what this guy sort of did. Like they sort of evolved that way.
Yeah, they evolve. That's the thing. I'm not sure if they can do it on command. But these guys kind of just like degenerated into ghoul states from being forced to eat like leapers and ghouls and animals. It wasn't really a
Yeah.
conscious choice, more something that was forced evolutionarily upon them. Um, Also, the Blood Angels kind of do this in reverse, actually, because they primarily still recruit from Baal, which is still a red-soaked hellhole, full of radiation. So all of their recruits, when they come in, have like some form of mutation or another, just from like
Yeah, they're covered in
breathing.
like lesions and stuff.
Yeah, so from basically just having radiation sickness all their lives. And the gene seed of Sanguinius fixes them mostly. Physically, they're perfect. There is still, of course, the Red Thirst and the Black Rage, but physically, they kind of like do the reverse of what the Strigoi did and go from being basically almost mutants into pinnacles of humanity.
Hmm. Yeah, these guys had the opposite journey.
Yeah, basically. So that is the Strigoi, and that brings us to the.
No, it's just I was pointing at the Strigoi and making a yucky face because he's a yucky looking dude.
They are very yucky looking dudes. This is very true. And then we come to our final vampiric bloodline, the Von Carsteins. These guys are the poster boys of the vampire counts, and for a very good reason. So, um, when I started, I deliberately tried to like find some parallels with Vampire the Masquerade clans to make comparisons. Like the Lahmians are like kind of Ventru and kind of Toreador. The Necrocs are sort of Tremere, but like the Strigoi are like sort of what are they called again? Animal gang. Doesn't matter too much. Um, that's gonna annoy me that I don't remember, but it's alright.
Or
Um,
like the Nosferatu. That was
No, well, Nosferatu kind of, but Gangrel was what I was thinking.
Gangrel. Got it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Nosferatu too, though. But like they weren't like really good one-on-one comparisons because they either did like blended multiple clans or they did their own thing in a way. But like the von Karsteins are literally just La Sombras. Like it's not even funny how fucking La Sombra these guys are. Um, the OG von Carstein Vlad, formerly known as Fashnesh, tried to be Ventru for a while, but then he became a wife guy, and his wife went, I can make him worse, and did in fact make him worse. So he became the Sombra's Hell as well.
Love that for her.
Yeah,
Make your man
Isabella.
worse, ladies. If you ladies out there, if you're listening, if you have a man, make him worse.
Be like Isabella von Carstein, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, so um, Vashnesh, the guy that was the general of the vampires under Nagash and the one that broke free from his control um, and like set the vampires loose upon the world in a way. Um, Basically, just vanished for a while after all of them fled. He traveled across the world. He was already, if I'm not mistaken, a bit of a traveler beforehand because he was quite fond of humanity in a way and tried to do good by them. Um, but like he was not a bad dude for a very long time. Like he was a vampire, but he was as good as a vampire could reasonably be expected to be. Eventually, he's found in Kislev, where he is found by the Strigoi, as we discussed. But generally, he's just been kind of like behind the scenes, a bit of a defender of humanity in a weird way. There's rumors that he helped Sigmar Unberogen, uh, the Mr. Warhammer Fantasy battles, fight against Nagash. He definitely taught one of the scariest necromancers of all time, Van Hel, necromancy in the lands of Sylvania in order to fight back a massive Skaven invasion. So, I mean, yeah, using necromancy and dark magic, but he was still defending humanity in a way. Um, then eventually in the lands of Sylvania, which, it's literally just Transylvania, but with the trans removed because of woke.
Boo.
Yeah, boo. Um, he found
Put the trans
a
back in Transylvania.
real Eventually, he found a lady known as Isabella, who he was immediately smitten by. He was basically, "You are Neferata, come again. I love you. I want you." Um,
So I'm immediately getting Strahd from this. Like this is
he could very much be Strahd. I would believe this immediately. I've never played Curse of Strahd, so I wouldn't actually know, but I'll take your word for it.
okay. But potential maybe spoilers for Strahd.
That's a game I'm probably not
uh,
going to play it.
vague. But yeah.
Mhm. Um, and Isabella von Carstein eventually, after they've married, and he turns her undead because she was very sick and about to die. So he is like, "Fine, I'll turn you undead, which will make you worse because like vampirism brings dark magic, and that brings out the worst in people. So I don't really want to do this, but you're gonna die from your illness if I don't. So I'm gonna turn you into a vampire." And she becomes much worse, and it's like, I can make my man worse, and makes her man a lot worse, and goes like, "Come on, Flash. You've been trying to protect humanity, but humanity is stupid. You should rule over them so they can stop being stupid." And Flash goes, "Yeah, yeah, I should do that." And this kind of twists the von Carsteins into like a really fucked up vampiric version of noblesse oblige, where the von Carsteins are
Mm.
born to rule the world, and the world must grovel before their feet. They are the most feared of the vampire clans. They're also where the name Vampire Counts comes from, because Vlad von Carstein is technically the Count of Sylvania, and thereby has like he's the only one that gets to call himself an actual vampire count. He eventually plunged the Empire, which is the kind of like early Renaissance, very late medieval age, kind of steampunk-ish Holy Roman Empire, and one
Mm-hmm.
of my favorite settings in the game. Uh, Favorite factions in the setting. Um, he plunged them into a 120-year-long vampire war in a bid to become the immortal Vampirer. He was eventually defeated when the Grand Theogenist of the cult of Sigmar, which is basically, imagine if the Pope wielded a big fuck off like Warhammer. Um,
Yeah, that's the coolest thing I've ever heard in my life.
oh
Absolutely.
yeah, like the warrior priests of Sigmar are amazing. We'll definitely get to them at some point. But um, basically had the finest thief in the world steal the von Carstein ring, which was the ring that Nagash had given Vashinesh to make him truly immortal. So like they'd killed him a couple times in the Empire, in the Vampire Wars, but he kept coming back. Like they shot him with a cannon, they like decapitated him. The fucker kept coming back. So the Grand Theogenist eventually figured out through certain means that they needed to steal to take this ring away from Vlad. So he sent the greatest thief in history to steal Vlad's ring, which he somehow managed to do while the vampire slept during the day, which is still impressive as all fuck. And with the ring gone, Vlad became vulnerable, but he was still, the vampire. He was still
Yeah.
like just wasting dudes left and right. And eventually, on the battlements of Altorf, the city that was under siege and current capital of the empire, the Grand Theogonists just pulled an edge, pulled a Bobby Lashley, pulled a Roman Reigns, and he just hit him with the spear, just right off the battlements and onto the stakes that had been like set out as kind of a palisade below, impaling both Vlad and himself, killing them both and ending the Vampire
Beautiful.
Wars. It was
Beautiful.
beautiful.
Love an end to an arc like that. Just a plunging to our deaths onto the pit of spikes.
It was really badass. I am not doing this justice. The story of Vlad is super fascinating, and again, Andy Law and Lawmaster of Sotek have very recently done a stream on Vlad von Carstein, which is a fascinating watch, and I highly recommend it. But that is in very brief the story of Vlad von Carstein. There are other famous von Carsteins like Konrad von Carstein, who is basically just a blood crazed butcherer. Um, and
Someone at
Manfred
GW hates the name Conrad.
Konrad von Carstein. Yep.
Well, just
Um,
like all the Conrads in the lore are just like shitty guys.
yeah, absolutely. And Manfred von Carstein as well, who is the last and most cunning of the von Carsteins, who is a wizard that strives to surpass Nagash in necromantic power. And I would love to have more detailed notes on those guys for you, but I am so sorry I ran out of time to prepare. So that's kind of for my notes on the vampires end.
All right, that's a ton of information on Warhammer vampires. This is
Absolutely.
fantastic. I might need to start playing Age of Sigmar because now looking at some of these types of vampires and how rad those models are, I don't know why I jumped into the 41st millennium.
Mission accomplished. We got another one. Yeah, they're also bringing back Warhammer the Old World, which is where this is all set in. Age of Sigmar is like the post-apocalyptic version of this,
Ooh,
which I've never played. I don't know all that much about the lore. Age of Sigmar is, I don't know how to describe it other than it's way more original than Warhammer Fantasy was, because Warhammer Fantasy's world map, I'm not sure if you've ever seen it, but it's basically just like our world map changed a little bit with Atlantis appearing on it. Let me grab you a quick uh, world map because it is like funny how much this thing is literally just our world. Um, whereas Age of Sigmar is basically said in the like Winds of Magic given form as like dimensions, which is a lot more like original and metaphysical, but it also makes it a lot harder for me to like easily connect to it in a way. It's like here I can go like, oh, the Empire. It's basically just a Holy Roman Empire, and then I go to Age of Sigmar, and it's just like the free cities of Sigmar. And like, okay, cool. What's like the elevator pitch from these guys?
yeah.
It's a lot harder for me to like figure it out in like a second than like what people's deal is there than in Warhammer Fantasy, which is why
It gives you a
I.
little more to like latch onto, and it's very funny that it's not just the actual world map. Like to just put this extra little peninsula here
Mhm,
uh, on Africa, and then like
mhm.
it's just warped. Like someone drew a world map from memory.
Basically, it's pretty great. Also, just to be clear, I don't want to knock Age of Sigmar. From what I've heard, it's very good and entertaining, and the models that have come out of it are fantastic. I just haven't been able to get myself into it the way that I have with Warhammer Fantasy in the old world.
You just
Um,
progress yourself age by age through.
basically. I've lost my heart to Warhammer Fantasy, so I've skipped Age of Sigmar, but like, no shade to those guys. They've been doing a lovely job from what I've heard. Um,
Yeah, but it is sort of like your lover's ex, you know, like it's the
mm,
replacement. If you're in love with Warhammer Fantasy, then Age of Sigmar is not the one that got away, but their main competitor. It's like
basically.
you're not allowed to be friends because you're dating
Fair,
their ex now.
pretty much. So yeah, what do you think of the vampires? Any favorite bloodlines?
I mean, obviously, I'm going with the Bene Gesserit of vampires, like the Lamia, clearly.
Obviously, the girl boss,
Girl boss, my girl boss
Illuminati.
vampire queens. Uh,
I
and
think you
then,
can actually feel them on the tabletop in the most recent version, which is really cool because
ooh,
when I got my Vampire Counts army, I think it was 7th edition instead of 8th, and back then you couldn't yet, but then they actually got rules for them eventually, which was super sick. I don't know if they actually got models though, but they look sick as all hell.
and I mean, our big beefy boys, they're uh, they look fun as hell to play.
Oh, the Blood Knights, yeah, they're great. I
Yeah,
love them.
the Blood Knights look awesome. Love that kind of lore. I'd probably go
Absolutely.
like Lamia, the Von Karsten, anything that's got giving me that like Barovia. Oh this, yeah, 100%. Queen shit.
Mhm. Yeah.
Save image.
If you want Barovia, you definitely want von Carstein. They're amazing.
Here's my girl. You slide over here. Yeah, 100%.
Hmm.
Come here, baby.
Oh,
Love you.
hmm.
Oh, beautiful. Perfect. My
Absolutely.
beautiful, perfect vampire queens
Hell
can
yeah.
do no wrong. I'll just leave that up there. We can. She'll look over my shoulder.
Hell yeah, good pick. So, do you have any questions or observations on the vampire counts or their ties to the Blood Angels, or just in general?
So, I mean, clearly there's no in-lore tie between the Blood Angels and the Warhammer Fantasy universe, and I can
Mm-hmm.
accept that GW is too scared to put it in the actual text that they're connected.
I mean,
But as a smart person of culture,
mhm.
I can see the through line that there is some sort of dark magic involved in the creation of vampires. And sure, the explanation is a little different. Sanguinius's gene seed is the reason they all have the thirst, but like, why? That's not explained. That's just left up to magic, and it's the same magic, I bet. Looking directly down barrel of the camera, it's the same magic that made the fantasy vampires. They just don't explain it that way. It comes from the warp.
I
That
mean,
makes sense.
yeah, you could definitely make that argument because, as far as I'm concerned, the fantasy and 40k warp are one and the same, which is a headcanon. They've been deliberately splitting them up more, but originally it was meant to be a shared universe. And frankly, I just think it's cooler to think that the warp in fantasy and 40k are the same. And the gene seed defects in the Primarchs are explicitly said to be caused by like chaos gods meddling with them. And the chaos gods are from the warp, are made of raw chaos, and chaos is the stuff of magic ultimately. So you're more accurate than you might have thought.
See? Do you see? I see what's going on here. I see the conspiracy.
Mhm.
I have connected the dots. I've put the red string between the cards, and I know why there are vampires. Now I just need
Absolutely.
to get my Bene Gesserit into the 41st millennium, and then we can fully Dune pill Warhammer in a way that has totally been done before.
I mean, Warhammer 40k started off as a knockoff of Dune, so that
Yeah,
makes
I
a
feel
lot of
like it,
sense.
it lines up really well.
Absolutely. Sweet. So yeah. Any final questions on the vampires before I very quickly cover the elves, because I did put them on the thumbnail and I did kind of promise I'd talk about them a little bit.
No, let's talk about elves.
All right, so elves. Um, so we're stepping away from the blood drinking parallels for a bit, and we're really going to focus more on the themes of like being cursed and falling from grace and having a doomed bloodline, um, and massive anger issues that are also very common in Sanguinius and the Blood Angels. So this all starts with Aenarion, the defender of Ulthuan, homeland of the elves. Um, we've already discussed Aenarion's story in the last stream with Pat, as we discussed Malarion, or Malekith, the Witch King of Nagaroth, and his parallels with Horus Lupercal, the Archtraitor. So I won't be running through all of that again, but to very briefly condense that, way back when magic was much more common in the Warhammer world, because the fast travel gates that the old ones had placed had exploded and turned into chaos portals, making the Warhammer world Cadia times two, because they have two Eyes of Terror, meaning that magic was pouring into the world, demons were pouring with it. The High Elves on Ulthuan, which is basically Atlantis, were getting absolutely butchered. Up comes this great hero named Aenarion, the Defender, who starts beating the demons back. Eventually, he draws a cursed sword, the Sword of Cain, the bloody-handed god of murder and war, um, to better beat the demons over the head with, and it does make him completely goddamn unstoppable, but it does also curse his entire bloodline. Um, Drawing the Sword of Cain is basically like, hey, you gain incredible power, but you also curse yourself and all of your descendants. He uses this to fight the demons back so hard that one of his best friends, Kalidor Dragon Tamer, can set up a magical vortex that basically just drains magic from the Warhammer world to uh, basically make it much more difficult for demons to manifest. Um,
Hmm.
so that is like the Cliff Notes version of the Cliff Notes version that I gave the people in the last stream. So Any questions so far? Because that was a
It's
lot in a
just
very short time.
I have to expose my Tumblr roots, and so this is very supernatural to me. There's like the whole arc where Dean gets the mark of Cain, which is passed down from one person to the next, that inspires you to murder and do killing and stuff.
Just a
Uh,
second, my cat is being very, very sad that he's not part of the stream.
Aw,
Oh, hey Pippin. Hello, big friend. Are you coming to say hello? Pippin says
kitty.
hello. Mm, hello, sir. Right, sorry.
Hi,
Super,
kitty.
supernatural.
Yes, there's like a whole arc where Dean gets the mark of Cain, which is like passed down from person to person. The only way you can get it is by killing the last person who had it, and like it makes you a supernatural murderer and unkillable murder machine, and slowly twists your soul demonic. Uh, and there's a whole like sad boy arc around it, which is typical of Supernatural,
Mm-hmm.
in a way. And I just sort of love seeing the parallels between things. And I used to think that, oh, they're just making up Bible stuff. I was like, maybe they're also ripping off Warhammer Fantasy a little bit.
There is, I believe, in Warhammer Fantasy that might be Tamarkan, who I don't know much about other than that he's been announced as part of Total War Warhammer's newest DLC. But that
Ooh.
sounds very much like the story of Lucius the Eternal in Warhammer 40k, who is a baller of a character who is cursed with a really shitty model. Pippin, stop destroying my wardrobe. No, stop it.
Once you let the cat in, the chaos starts and you can't stop it. It's just on a roll from there.
Yeah, I just don't want him to destroy my really fancy. Pippin! No, that's an expensive wardrobe. Stop destroying it. Go lay in the sun.
Kitty. He's just
Just
gonna go right
immediately
back and
goes
do it
back to
again.
destroying my wardrobe. Motherfucker. Okay, you're getting out of the room. Come on, boy. Bugger off then. Yeah,
He
she
didn't want to
doesn't
be part of
like
the
the hidden
stream. He just
knife.
wanted to come in and destroy your wardrobe.
Can do a lot. I love that criminal, but like that wardrobe is really fancy, and he's not going to get to destroy it more than he already has. Um, right. So yeah, I can totally see those parallels. Um, that is very, very, very strongly condensed. Aenarion and his curse. Now, eventually, the son of Aenarion, Malarion, um, starts a giant elven civil war that sees them flee to Nagaroth, which is basically in North America. They become the Dark Elves. The elves that remain in Ulthuan become the High Elves, and they basically keep murdering each other for the next couple of millennia over who gets to be the king of all the elves. Um, Malarian basically just stays in control of the Dark Elves through this entire time because he's now immortal with how much magic he does. Meanwhile, the High Elves go through a ton of kings, partially because the Dark Elves keep murdering them, but some also just die peacefully in their beds. Um, Eventually, the bloodline of Aenarion keeps propagating itself, and they keep being very thoroughly checked for the curse of Aenarion, because you don't want to have a cursed king lead your people, because that can lead to a lot of problems.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, from the bloodline of Aenarion are born two children, Tyrion and Teclis, twins. Um, Teclis is one of the greatest wizards of his age. The Curse of Aenarion in him is physical. His body is broken. He is weak, very fragile, but he is a wizard without peer. He basically single-handedly teaches the humans of the Empire magic and gets them to accept it as something that shouldn't be burnt at the stake when he uses the handful of wizards that he's thrown together to defeat one of the greatest chaos incursions of all time by the ever-chosen Asparkul, which you can learn more about on our previous stream on the Black Legion. Um, Call me Dean Kamen, inventor of the Segway. Uh, but he is
Always be
not
plugging.
always be plugging. He is not really who I'd want to focus on because, if anything, he is far more diplomatic than most elves are. Because high elves are so completely convinced of their own superiority that they are like psychologically incapable of entertaining the notion that like dwarves or humans could be their equals. Teclis almost manages to overcome that, which is a feat. Like he is merely accidentally very arrogant instead of on purpose, which is very impressive for High Elf.
Yeah. Go on.
And then we have Tyrion, who is basically his brother's complete opposite. He is an absolute gigachat at war, perfectly strong, tough, incredibly fast, as all elves are. Incredible general, brilliant warrior without peer. Um, but he's not stupid, but he's not a politician at all, like in the slightest. Like I'd say this man has Rogel Dorn levels of bluntness. Like he would walk up to like a nepo baby hire, but like a very important nepo baby hire, who has been appointed general because he's like the son of the king or whatever, and you really shouldn't piss him off. And he would, and this nepo baby would make a strategic blunder, and Tyrion would walk up to him and just go like, "You are a terrible general. You shouldn't be here. Be ashamed of yourself. Go home." Which you're not wrong, but damn, my guy, that is you shouldn't be doing that. That's the son of the king. Like that idea.
Yeah.
Like or like to the queen of the elves, who is also kind of like dating on the side because high elves don't give a shit about monogamy. It's got like, honey, does this dress make me look fat? Yes. Like like that's the kind of levels of like foot and mouth that we are dealing with here.
Okay.
Um, but that's not even how the curse of Aenarion really manifests in him. Well, maybe to an extent. But the big problem is that Tyrion can have dark moods. He can be rash. He can be really prone to anger, and he can easily be goaded into making terrible tactical decisions that he then gets out of only because he is a warrior without pair. Like, concrete example, he fought off an entire Skaven army by himself with just his horse. And to just reiterate how scary Skaven are, like, yeah, sure. The average Ratman is chronically backstabbing, incredibly cowardly, and will like run away if encountered with any real resistance. But there are so many of them. They consider like a 10-to-1 trade a good trade because there's 20 of them for every one of the enemy. Um, they have wizards that are also kind of sort of priests of their god. They have giant rat demons that they can summon as like direct emissaries of their god to aid them. They have incredible diseases that they can conjure up that strengthen them while weakening their enemies, while also rotting their brains so much they simply lose all fair response and will fight till the last man. They have great plague catapults that will just bombard you with disease. They have the aforementioned doom wheels, which are just giant rat wheels with Tesla coils on them that they just drive into the enemy. Like it's some sort of like unicycle from hell. They have, and this is one of my favorites. They have, They have guns with an incredibly high rate of fire that they call rattling guns. They have fucking
No, stop. Of course they do.
yeah. They have
Of
fucking
course that's what they're
snipers.
called. What else would they call them? It would
They
be
have
silly to call them something else.
exactly. They have goddamn like they have rat ogres, which are like hulking mutant rats that they have made that are like the size of I don't fucking know something that's really big, an actual ogre. That they will just like sick on you. Like Skaven are very funny, but they're also horrifyingly scary and competent when they want to be. And Tyrion fought an entire army of them off by himself with just his horse. Now that's an incredible feat, but how the fuck did he get in a position where his only option, where the option he chose was, I am going to fight an entire army by myself? Like, I'm sorry, buddy, but I don't care how good you are. That's not smart.
Yeah. I mean, until you told me all of those other things, I was like, yeah, that seems like a fine idea. He seems strong. It's an army of rats. How much could they do? And clearly, I was wrong. I would find myself in the situation. So maybe he's got the same like dumb bitch disease that I do.
Yeah, it's like the Curse of Aenarion and him is very much a dumb bitch disease and anger management issues, which again sounds very familiar, doesn't it?
hmm
Hmm.
Yeah, it's my
So
life story. But I think you're talking about somebody else.
I am talking about the Black Rage,
Yeah,
and especially to an extent, Sanguinius himself had anger problems as well. Like his fury didn't come out often, but when it did, it was great and terrible to behold. Um, but I wanted to mention Tyrion specifically because the way the Curse of Aenarion manifests in him is very reminiscent of the Black Rage, a giant spell of anger brought on by the legacy of a curse inflicted on your forebears generations ago.
yeah, that totally makes sense.
Yeah, so like if you like the Blood Angels because they are vampires, obviously you play the vampire count. If you like the Blood Angels for their tragically flawed fall from grace, but the struggle to do good and remain better despite that, I think Tyrion is a pretty good pick thematically.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a storytelling perspective, that's so much more interesting. But
Yeah,
for like from a tabletop perspective, Vampire Queens is just like much cooler, you know?
yeah,
Like like if I'm gonna paint an army of sad boys, like that's not nearly as fun as like girl boss vampire queens to
this
paint
is
and like feel
true.
it as an army. But if I'm gonna write a story, then centering sad boy cursed with rage, uh, army of Dean Winchesters, that's a
Hmm.
much more interesting fiction
Fair.
to
Don't
tell a story in.
underestimate Tyrion. Like this dude looks cool as shit.
Mm, come on, mouse, don't fail me now. Oh no, he looks fucking rad.
Yeah, and like his mini is pretty great too. Like the high elves are like the definition of just like like too fancy to the point where it shouldn't work, but they pull it off anyway. Like their helms are so stupid, but they look so cool.
Let's get Tyrion up here. And yeah, I mean that's some real like edgelord shit too, though.
Yeah,
I mean, still would though. But
the same.
I had yeah, we're on the same page.
Hmm.
You know what I'm about.
I do.
All right, let's see this model. Yeah, I mean these classical like Warhammer Fantasy models that come from sort of the old wargaming era. They have people painted them in a certain style that looks very like medieval middle age European. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like there's some bright saturated colors. Uh and I think maybe it's just the models were um sort of designed in a certain way. So
Yeah.
yeah, here's the model.
It also helps that
But
of all the armies in Warhammer Fantasy, the High Elves are probably the ones with like the cleanest, brightest palette. Like maybe there's some Empire factions or Bretonnia factions that can
it
roughly
might
play
be
it,
that
but
it's just them and the Bretonians that I'm really familiar with the models of.
those tend to have like the most colorful aspects. Yeah,
Yeah, I think they could do with a layer of grime, but that might just be my aesthetic that I'm
fair. Yeah.
complaining
Oh,
about
I mean,
here.
if you want to see the High Elves with Grime, you'd want the Shadow Warriors of Nagaryth under Alith Anar, or you'd want the Dark Elves.
Ooh, I'll take a look at them. I just feel
Yeah,
like this guy would look a lot better just dipped in some Nuln oil and like
I
pulled out
agree.
to.
Hmm. Yeah, I had
I mean,
some of this.
objectively, that would make me a worse painter to do that, but also like,
I cover all my models in like watered down. What was it, scorched brown? So
yeah,
it
you just
really
need a
helps.
little bit of. You need to look like they haven't showered in a little while. It's
Yeah,
Warhammer,
exactly.
not Peace Hammer. Like it's.
Exactly. Yeah. So I also had a couple notes on Alithanar, but I don't really have enough to talk about with him. He is a very cool character. I would recommend looking him up a little bit. And I also wanted to talk about Bretonia a bit because I think there are some very cool parallels between the uh, image of like cultured high nobility that both the Blood Angels at their best and the Bretonians at their best have, contrasted with like holding up a horrifically dystopian regime. Like, I don't care
Yeah.
how noble and good-hearted the Blood Angels are; they are fighting for the Imperium of Man, which is a horrible fascist nightmare state. They can go to hell. ACAB includes Sanguinius.
Yeah. I mean,
Same,
he's dead, so
yeah,
I guess it now it includes Dante.
yeah, fair. Similarly for Bretonia, like the Lady of the Lake is all about chivalry and honor and what have you. But they also have feudalism that would make Tsarist Russia blush. I just didn't get around to having my notes ready for them on time, which is a shame because I really like Bretonia, but I think this is the end of my notes. I'm not familiar enough with Bretonia to do that off the cuff, so
Totally
uh,
cool. If this is popular enough and we get enough write-ins, then maybe we'll do a part two on the Bretonian Blood Angel connection.
absolutely. And we've hit the 2 hour mark just about now, so I think this is a pretty good place to end today's stream. So
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast. I learned so much.
I'm very glad. Do you have any final closing remarks, questions, comments?
No, I've had so much fun being on here, and let the team know if you want to have me back and talk more about vampires. We could do Sisters of Battle in Bretonia too, if we want to talk about girl boss queens who are defending a nightmare fascist state.
Oh, that would be a good one. I think Sisters of Battle, yeah, Bretonia would be a good one because there are also a bunch of religious thematics. I might also just use that as an excuse to talk about the various cults and religions of the world because those are also very
Ooh,
interesting. But we'll see for when that comes. We definitely would love to have you on again. The idea right now is to kind of like have a pool of guests that we can just have on a rotating schedule. So we'd love to have you back
for
again.
sure.
Do you have anything to plug in general? Because if I remember correctly, you have some RPGs that you made.
Yeah, so I write one shots and TTRPGs. You can find that at pubs dot theadventuring dot party. You can see me on a stream. I've been on one D&D stream. You can see it at on Bard House Media, on Twitch. The one VOD there, and otherwise you can follow me at Allie's Adventuring Party on the Bluesky app, and for more unhinged uh, chaos goblinry.
We do love some unhinged chaos goblinry. Meanwhile, in terms of stuff, you can find me on Blue Sky on anarchoshanties.bluesky.social. And for the rest, I have some games up on itch.io/omnicide101 that you can play in your browser if you'd like. Beyond that, I have a bunch of creative hobbies that you can ask me about on Blue Sky whenever you want. And of course, we'd love to have you for our next episode of SigMarines. Hopefully, the next one in 2 weeks should be run by my friend and co-host Tally. Um, we've kind of sorted on a schedule where we're planning to run every second and fourth Saturday of the month, where generally one of us will do the one Saturday and the other will do the other. For now, I'm doing this. I'm doing the second Saturday. Tally will be doing the fourth. That might switch depending on necessity, but generally speaking, you can look forward to seeing each of us once a month. It's been an absolute pleasure, Ali. Thank you so much for being on, and
As always.
thanks to all of you for watching. You will be able to find the VOD of this stream on our YouTube channel, which is also called SigMarines. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you had a good time, and I will see you next time. Cheers.
Bye, everybody.